What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of the Awakened Soul Podcast. I am your host, CEO Haize, and we have a great show planned for you guys this week. I know I say that every week, but one would like to think that every show is great. What's going on, people? If you want to follow me off the top, you can do so at CEO Haize. That's CEO Haize. If you want to follow the podcast, you can do so at Awakened Soul Pod or at the Awakened Soul Pod, just depending on what platform you're looking for us at. We have a guest that I have really been waiting to work with. That is Courtney V from the Barbie Way podcast this week. We have a conversation about, we each brought questions that we feel the opposite sex isn't always honest about, so we ask each other that. We also talk about Malcolm and Marie and some of the themes that are in that movie, how narcissism affects relationships, trauma, all that good stuff in this week's episode. But before we get into all of that, we got to jump into my dark and twisted crazy ass mind, which we're going to do right after our intro music. I'll see you guys after that.
And he gonna tear their ass up. Simple as that.
All right, beautiful people, we're in my dark and twisted crazy ass mind, and this week, for once, it's not dark at all. So I was left with thinking about something after last week's episode. Which, shout out to Stephanie from the Mocha Minutes podcast, who's my pod family. And we had a great episode, and the response to that has been amazing, and I love that people talk about our chemistry. I know I need to have her on more often. I'm going to aim to do that probably more this year, for us to do something probably a couple more times this year, again, as the content fits. But she said something in there, and she talked about how a man had said something to her about black women doing challenges, and if they had focused on that and things like that, right? And so it got me to thinking, like we always, I'm mixing a couple things in this, honestly, is that on another episode of a different podcast to do, The Breaks Radio, my boy Marquis, who's a co-host there, had mentioned, like, this was a month or so ago, he had talked about, like, when we say doing it for the culture, what is the culture? And, like, the culture can be looked at as a lot of different things. I think we all know that at this point the culture could be, and Denzel had, like, there was like a clip where Denzel really explained the culture, and he did it very well. Like, it's like shared experiences, it's knowing what it's like to be us. Like, the culture is any and everything, and you know, there's different aspects of the culture, different generations within the culture. So when we say stuff of what we're doing for the culture, and I'll explain how that comes together with what Stephanie said last week, but when you think about it, when we're creating culture, when we're talking about the culture, black culture, it's really, I said before, it's our shared experiences, but it's us creating things that make us happy, us creating things that make us feel connected, us creating things that bring us together. We are such a divided people sometimes, even though we're not a monolith. That's something that we support here, and we always talk about. But the fact is that when you talk about doing something for the culture, when you talk about the culture in general, it is the challenge. Us having challenges is a part of that. And when you look, I know that, and the challenges, they turn into more. It's not just us. It's not just black people. But when you look at that, like, that's the same thing as, like, how, you know, when you hear the cha-cha slide come on, when everyone knows the electric, like, we all have these things that are inherently in our culture, and it's things that bring about joy, things that bring about happiness, things that when we all get together and do them, we're doing them as a unit. The challenges are the modern day example of that. So when you look at the Don't Rush challenge, when you look at the silhouette challenge, like, as much as it's easy to look at those things and overlook them and think that this is just a social media fad, people are doing this for clout, it's really a new generation of us staying connected and having competitions and who did it better, and it's so joyous. So when we talk about what is the culture, what is doing for the culture, how do we create the culture? We have such negative shared experiences in our DNA, from what our ancestors went through, what our parents went through, what we still go through and look at and see in media all the goddamn time. And that is, unfortunately, another side of the culture. But the part that I'm focusing on here is that when we tear down, and I've even said it, I've been one to say it on the Breaks the Breaks Radio, and talk about how, you know, a lot of people make music, and if you can get a TikTok challenge going off of it, then that's kind of people's goals now. It's not even about streams. Like, I've said all this, but to take that out of it and just look at the cultural impact of it, is when we create, or when these challenges are created, the Junebug challenge, the silhouette challenge, whatever it is, when it is created and people partake, and they have their enjoyment, and they do it amongst their friends. They do it to start conversation. Like, I get it. Some people do it for intention. Some people do it for clout, whatever you want to look at it with. But at the same time, there's a part of that we're building positive shared experiences, where we're building positive memories, where we're staying connected to one another in a way that we just don't always get to have. So yes, when you talk about the culture, when we're talking about what is it to create the culture, when we're talking about what is it to experience the culture, that is absolutely an aspect of it. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice to act like it's not. Like, everything in the culture can't just be the negative, can't just be what we deal with police, can't just be us being dealt with unjustly. Like, yes, that's a part of it, but we're all searching for the thing as well that is going to be positive, that brings a smile to our face, that makes us happy, that makes us like have fun with one another, and just brings about positivity. So yes, I get it. The challenges are their thing, right? And you know, it's something in it, but it's us creating a memory, and I think that's ultimately what it all stems from. So yeah, that's just my opinion on it. It's something that's really been on my mind and heart, and you know, I try to think about things on a different level. That's part of why I started this podcast, and it really just, to me, makes sense. So it is what it is. With what you guys think about that, let me know. Do you think that, like, part of what makes these challenges and stuff so appealing, so much fun, so amazing, is the fact that it's another shared experience between our people? I'll be glad to hear what you guys think about that. But we got one more thing that I want to talk about in this In the Mind of Haize segment. And so Judas and the Black Messiah came out, and I'm going to have a special episode that's going to drop sometime within the next few days, where I'm just going to really be just talking about that film. And it's going to be a short one. It'll probably be like a 15-20 minute episode or whatever. May have a guest, I may not. But if that movie doesn't do anything, and we're not going to get into spoilers here, but if it doesn't do anything else but drill home the point of it be your own people, right? It be your own people. We have such a crab in the bucket mentality cultural wise, and this goes back, I guess it kind of links into what I was talking about before. Like, we want to create and have these good and joyful experience between one another, but there is absolutely this of they're either trying to pull you back down in the culture, or people like you can only ascend to a certain level with some people, to some people's minds. And it just, like, for example, I'm in a filmmakers group, and in that filmmakers group, there's some ignorance that is spoken. There's a lot of black beauty in there as well. But so they were talking about how a lot of these black actors now in Hollywood, and Damson Idris was one that they mentioned, and you know, I think he's going to be a super big star in this industry. But they were saying how that they're British, and they would like to see more roles go to American blacks, and I get it where they're getting from with that, but I think the thing is, and that's what it goes to, that crab in the bucket mentality. It be your own people, because listen, yes, they're British, and there was even some ignorant people saying that, you know, you can't be black and British, and I asked the young man if he ever left out the country, and he said no, but that's a story for another day. But when you look at the experience, I get it, that we live in America. We're used to dealing with American politics and issues or whatever. And, you know, when you see these black Brits come in, and people look at it as they're stealing roles, and it's not. They're being cast by African American directors and producers. They're being cast because they have a great talent. But when we try to even separate ourselves by so much. We try to separate ourselves by color. We try to separate ourselves by how we lived, how we grew up. We try to separate ourselves now by nationality, and we forget that their ancestors shared a lot of the same stories that our ancestors did. And we forget that. And then when we try to break that down and tear them apart because they're black Brits, it's ridiculous to me. So let's let go of that crab in the bucket mentality as best as we can. Let's love one another. And you know, I get it to a degree, but at the same time, we're at a time in Hollywood now where there are so many prominent black faces that it shouldn't really matter. To me, at least, my opinion, it shouldn't really matter as long as the right person is being cast because of their talent. We need to see more black faces. We need to get more black stories told, and we are finally. And to see, people want to tear it down because they may have been born in Britain, it's mind-boggling to me. But that's our people. That's unfortunately what happens with us sometimes. I love to see what you guys feel about it. Let me know what you guys think. But that's it for the In the Mind of Haize segment. Not too long one. We got a long recording with Courtney today, so I kept it pretty short. Like I said, on the lookout for that special episode dropping about Judas and the Black Messiah. On top of that, next week is episode 200 of The Awakened Soul. I can't believe in a little under 3.5 years we have already gotten to 200. Really, it's over 200 episodes if you count the bonus episodes, but of the numbered main episodes of The Awakened Soul, we're at 200 next week when this one a week after this episode drops, and it's been hell of a journey. We'll talk all about it on episode 200. It's great. It's great. I can't lie that I'm super excited about episode 200. I'm excited that I've made it this far, especially in an industry where a lot of podcasters really, they drop off, they fall off, and hats off to them. That I used to talk stuff or whatever, but this is a hard industry to be in, especially if it's something that you do at a certain level. It takes so much energy and time and all that passion to put in it that it can be exhausting and can eventually fizzle out, unfortunately. But we'll talk about that next week when it's time. That's it for me. I am CEO Haize, and this has been the In the Mind of Haize segment. We're gonna go ahead, we're gonna take a break. You're gonna hear an ad from another podcast, and on the other side of that, I'll catch you with Courtney V from the Barbie Way podcast. I'll see you guys there.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.